Welcome back to the farm. My name's Roz, also known as Passion Flower, and you'll find me here each week talking about my farming and creative life. Well, firstly, for those that have been regulars, you'll see that I have Wade with me today. This is the first time I've brought him over to the shed and he seems quite happy over here. So this could be a regular thing and he will become my work buddy while I'm over at the shed. Following on from last week where the cows broke the fence, we had a little bit of repair work to do. What we first had to do was fix the fence that they had managed to bust through. They had pushed the star picket up, which was holding it at one end. So what we had decided is that we should just pop a pine post in there instead. So we've done that. The fence is now much more sturdy, and so far they haven't tried, or maybe they have and they haven't succeeded, but the fence is still standing strong. Then we had to figure out what they had done to push through the other section where I had locked them out and then they were still able to get in. It was a gap that we had put in between a fence and the gate so that we could slide through without having to open the gate all the time. And they'd sort of pushed it out of the way. So unfortunately, our little sliding through is now blocked off. We've put a couple of boards of wood across so that they can't push through, and it's made that pole also much more firm than it was before. And so far again, that has kept them where they should be when we want them to be there. As you've seen from many episodes, we do like to repurpose and reuse things around the farm. Our latest version of this is a new drinking trough for Nasi. Up until this point, he's been able to tip over, move, play with pretty much every water vessel that we've put in the yard for him. And so this time we are trying an old laundry trough. We siliconed up the bottom to seal up the plug hole, and we kind of dug a little spot out in the ground, not too deep, and with a pole we have secured it in place and it's up against a fence. This looks to be working. It has stayed in place, especially when it's full, because it's quite heavy, and because it's up against the fence there's no real room for it to twist around. He seems happy with it, and it will be easy enough for us to be able to just lift up over the pole to be able to clean it out when we need to. We've had the goats and Nasi in yards next to each other for a little while now. We've had the goats over mowing for us, and then we've been switching them between the yards, so sort of moving Nasi into one and putting the goats in the other, but keeping them separate because we weren't entirely sure how they would go being in the same yard together. Well, we found out this week. I'd gone to the post office and I came home to find that Warren was in with Nasi. And for a minute I panicked, and then they both seemed quite calm and were good. So we just left them there. The only issue was that Warren had been able to get through a hole in the fence, but the chow, being a little bigger, wasn't able to squeeze through. So for that afternoon, Warren was sitting on one side of the fence and Chow was on the other side, and I think they were both a little bit confused as to why they weren't in the same yard anymore. Now that they are all seeming to get along quite well, we've now opened up the space for them so that they have double the amount of space all the time, and the three of them are now sharing everything, which I think is going to be quite good because it means Nasi can stay closer to the chooks all of the time, and the goats are able to keep the grass down in the whole area as well. Sometimes Warren thinks she's a dog, and I think she might try and play with Nasi sometimes, but he is smart enough to sort of move himself away, put himself up on his little platform and ignore her, and then she will settle back down again. It's been a few weeks since I've dyed some yarn, primarily because I was waiting for a shipment to come in. With Australia Post being so inundated with parcels at the moment, everything has taken so much longer to arrive, and I was waiting on some 8-ply yarn to arrive so that I could start dyeing it up again, because very recently I've sold quite a lot of my DK 8-ply yarn and I needed to replenish my stock. So the colours I started with were the ones that I have most recently sold. I started with Ocean, which is a really cool blue. And then I did lavender fields, purple and green, while the sun shines, which is a golden yellow, and flowering gum, which is my red with little pops of olive through it. And then I had a special order for some Christmas yarn, which is still available on my website. And this one is Sugar Plums, which is the very first Christmas colour that I dyed up, and I have a real soft spot for it, and I'm quite excited that someone has ordered 3 skeins of this in the DK. I'm really excited to see what they're going to make, and this one skein that is left will go up into the shop. And after dyeing Sugar Plums, I think I want to go back to some of my earlier recipes and dye some of those up again on DK as well. I have an older one that is Gumball Machine and Pure Imagination. There's sort of some rainbow kind of colours which are quite fun. I think I'd like to do those on DK, as well as one of my more recent colourways, which is Wildflowers. I've also decided that I need to research a spin dryer that I can have down in the shed. It will help to dry my yarn a lot quicker, to spin the excess water out. For this recent batch of DK that I wanted to get dry really quickly, I put all 20 skeins into a tub and I carried them up to the house, which was really heavy, so that I could put them in the washing machine, and then brought them back down so that they weren't dripping wet to hang and dry down here. But if I had a spin dryer down here, I'd be able to do all the process in one go and not have to lug it all back up to the house and back down again. I've only done a really tiny bit of knitting this week. I have been knitting some other dishcloths, this time in an orange. So I've talked about Seb and his eggs before, and we've been using the kitchen cloths to clean the eggs. Obviously a different one than we're using for cleaning our benches, but we're getting confused. So I thought the best way to get around that was to make them in a different colour. So I had some orange, so I thought orange for yolks, that's sort of a good association so we don't forget, and they will be the cloths that we'll be using for cleaning the eggs. So I made a smooth one and we're trying that out, and it seems to work okay, but I'm going to now experiment with adding some different textures to the cloth to see if there's a better way to be able to get off some of the harder on dirt. Sometimes there's a broken yolk in there, so everything gets a little bit sticky. So if there's a bit more texture in the knit, then it will help to get that off, and then there's a smooth one to sort of wipe away the excess dirt at the end. So not a lot of knitting, but I have been doing some crochet. I think the bug has bitten me. I have cast on, if that's the right word, a brand new granny striped blanket. This one is 302 chain, so it's slightly bigger than the one I made before. And my plan is to only use passion flower yarns, so only hand dyed yarns that I have made, and just over time progressively add to it and make it into sort of a memory blanket of all of my colorways. So even the tiniest little scrap, anything that I've used for making a sample, or if I've got a little bit extra, I can just pop it into the dye pot with the bigger skeins to sort of try and get a whole lot of different colors going. I'm using a brown for my in-between color, so I'm still doing an in-between color like I did with the previous one. It is a mistake batch. I was trying to do a rainbow, but the colors hadn't set before I put it all into the pot together, and so they all mixed together and became brown. That happens sometimes. So it's a light brown and it's got a couple of specks of like blue and pink and purple in it. So it's not unattractive, but I obviously couldn't repeat it because I don't really know how I managed to do it. And it's not something that I'd want to sell anyway. So I'm using that, and I think it will look really pretty as quite a neutral in between these bright pops of color that I have. And I'm using every single little scrap. I've done 3 rows of color so far. I have a row of chockberry, a row of flowering gum, and the 3rd row I've actually combined quite a number of colorways together because I didn't have enough to make it all the way across. So I started with millions of tiny pieces, and then I added in festive pavlova, some pure imagination, and some peppermint pie, I think, as well. So they're all colors that have some white as well as some pops of color. And I think that it still looks really nice. So I'll be going along, if I can get 2 rows out of one colorway from the scraps that I have, great. If not, I'll just try and match in another color that might work along with it. And as they're all my colors and they're all based on the 16 colors that I then mix to make other colors, I find that the colors do kind of all work together because there isn't a broad base of colors from which they're created. It's my scrappy blanket and it's making me happy, and it will be a very long-term project because I don't have a ton of scraps. I try and be as efficient as possible, so I might have to actually proactively make little bits extra as I go along so that I can continue to work on this blanket. Well, that's it for another week. Thanks for spending some time with me. If you're enjoying these videos, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the farm. Bye.